Very good. Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. We are here with the New Mexico Minority Business Development Agency, another iteration of our many webinars that we have. It comes up to almost once a week, at least, we have a webinar informational on something related to growing and improving your business. Today's topic is going to be on websites. So this is going to be like a review on why it's important to start a new website. So we'll cover what is a domain name, how to register one, what are the options for platforms, hosting platforms that are available, and which ones are best for different types of businesses, how to build website pages. And thankfully, today we have an expert in websites, Jordan Palma, who has been doing websites for a lot of MBDA clients. So if you are a business owner who doesn't have a website, or maybe you want to get a better version of it, or you're interested in e-commerce, please reach out to us at MBDA and we'll make sure to connect you with Jordan so that she can support you in the creation of a website. So thank you so much, Jordan, for being here, and I'll pass it over to you so that you can start informing us on all things website.
All right. Let me get set up momentarily. I'll share my screen. Okay. First and foremost, I want to thank the New Mexico Minority Business Development Agency for having me. Today, we're going to go over, as has been mentioned, a lot of website essentials. It's not going to go in depth into the nitty-gritty parts about building a website, but I do want you all to leave this webinar with some basic knowledge on like what hosting is, what domain names are, what platforms might work best for your website, and so on. As a quick introduction, I am Jordan Palma. I run a small freelance graphic design agency. Generally speaking, I specialize in building websites on WordPress for businesses in New Mexico, as well as providing graphic design services for said businesses. For today, what we are going to be discussing is a lot of like website building blocks, what domains are, what hosting is, a quick overview of some content management systems, and what you might want to think about including on your new site once you have your domain, your hosting, and your content management system selected. I'm going to try and wrap this up at around 40 minutes so that way I can open it up to questions and answers. With that, let's go ahead and get started. But before even starting the web development process, a lot of the times I will tell clients to start thinking about their business goals for their site. No matter how you build your site, whether that be if you hire a designer like me, or if you decide to do it yourself, you should be defining a lot of business goals that are important to consider as you build your site. You want to think about short-term goals for your website as well as long-term goals for your business, so that way your site can scale with your business. I put together a quick set of questions that you might want to like fill out in like a notebook before you start designing your site. The first big one I always tell people to think about is, who is your audience? Who are you trying to market your business towards? Your site should be designed around that audience you have in mind. For instance, if you have an audience that largely accesses websites via a mobile device, you want to make sure that your site is really optimized for that. You want to make sure your site is mobile responsive, because that's going to be where customers look first in that particular instance. You want to understand what you're trying to do on your site. Are you trying to sell something? Are you trying to just convey information? Do you want to have like an event booking platform and things like that? That question really will lead you to understanding like what platforms and web builders will work best for your website. You also generally want to look at what your competitors are doing. Oftentimes, it's a good way to start your site is by taking 5-10 minutes to Google search the competitors you have and bring up their websites. Are they mostly conveying information, or are they trying to sell something on your site or their site rather? And based off of that, you can kind of cater your site around that because if you're doing something completely different from your competitors without knowing what you're doing, it might be confusing to visitors who are visiting your website with a certain expectation in mind. You want to also think about how much customization you want on your website. Do you want complete control over what you're doing on your site? Or do you want to just like rely on pre-made templates and builders and things like that? You want to think about your long-term business goals as you're building your site. Oftentimes, clients will come to me with a site that they built in a really simple building platform. And that was great for their business when they first started. However, because they didn't think about their long-term business goals, that site no longer is able to support their business needs. And so it wasn't able to scale with their business. And in cases where that happens, oftentimes we have to build a site from scratch. So you can save yourself a lot of work in the long term if you're defining those business goals for your site early on. The last question, and this is one I always get when I have clients come in, is questions around budget. One thing I always tell people is your website is going to be one of your biggest marketing platforms you have for your business. It is going to be the first place visitors look for business information. It's going to be the first place people look to find ways to contact your business. And so if you are able, it would be really beneficial to you to set aside a large portion of your marketing budget towards a website building platform that's really robust. Granted, that's not always something that's available to businesses. And so you want to also think about like, if you're only able to afford a certain amount per month on a website, what platforms can support that while also supporting scalability of your business. With that, there are many types of websites you can build. And as you start researching some of this, you'll see a million different categories of websites. And when I am talking to clients, I generally break websites into two different categories, e-commerce sites and informational sites. E-commerce sites are sites that take transactions. They allow for the trade of goods and services online. They are sites that are things like online stores or sites that sell subscriptions or event tickets and things like that. One thing to consider if you're looking at e-commerce platforms is, do you need to have users log into a login portal? Are you saving account information? Because oftentimes e-commerce sites will include that as part of their platform. The next type of site that I will tell clients about is what I like to call informational sites. They are sites that do not have any transactional functionality to them. They are made to provide information to users. Often they are really simple sites, and generally speaking, they serve a singular purpose, which is to convey information to your audience. Sites like this that come to mind are things like blogs, very simple business sites like 4 to 5 page websites, things like portfolios as well. Great. So you've taken all these questions, you've thought about them for your business, you know, like kind of what direction you want to go with a website. The next thing I think would be beneficial for you to understand is what goes into building a website and what do you need to start looking for. What are the building blocks of building a website? Depending on the functionality of your website, there may be more you need to consider than like what we're going to go over today, but these are going to be the simplest things that you need to get started with on your website. what you'll need is a server, you'll need a domain, and you'll need a customer management system. When I am talking to people about what goes into a website, I often use the metaphor of a restaurant. When you're trying to start a restaurant, right, you'll need a building, so like a physical location for that to take place. You'll need some sort of building sign, and then you'll need what goes inside of that building. What kind of tables are you using? What kind of chairs go inside that restaurant and things like that. And parts of a website can be thought of in similar ways. One of the first things you're going to look for when you're building a restaurant is going to be your physical location, right? Where are you going to rent space to host your website? And that is the web equivalent of like what is called a server. And a server, simply put, is a computer that is connected to the internet. It lives in physical space in the real world. And companies, as you're starting to look for websites, will rent you space on that server to store all of your site information. That real world computer will hold everything from text to your web code to images or anything else you want to have on that website. It's called a server because it serves up content. As you're looking for sites, the act of renting space on a server is called hosting. So you will be looking for hosting platforms for your website. Once you have a hosting platform in mind, the next thing you need to think about is what's called a domain. And if we go back to the restaurant metaphor, right? Our restaurant, we have our building, we like our building, we need to put a building sign on it so people know what that building is and where we're located. A domain works much the same way. It's how customers find your website. Anytime you type something like www.businessname.com into your search browser, that is looking up a domain for a website. Any device that searches for this will connect to your website, which then will connect to the server that stores all of your site information. The last thing you'll need to think about is what's called a content management system. And it's the equivalent of like having all of your tables and chairs and menus in your restaurant. It's everything that goes on your site and how it's managed. What used to be the standard is sites used to be made solely using coding. Sites still are made that way today, but it's much, much more common to build a site using what's called a content management system, which allows you to put things like text or images on your site or pages on your site without needing to know how to code. Many platforms have a content management system of some sort. So things like Wix or Shopify or Squarespace or WordPress will have a native content management system in place that'll allow you to build pages on your website without knowing how to code at all, which is great. Now that we've looked at each of these components, let's break them down a little bit so you know what to start looking for your site specifically. Again, you'll need to find a hosting plan. You'll need to find a server to store all of the information on your site on. Expanding on the website or the restaurant metaphor, finding a web host is a lot like finding a building to rent. And there are many different types of hosting, but I'm going to go over 3 of them today that I see that are the most common that I work with. The first type of hosting that you may find online is what's called shared hosting. And shared hosting is very similar to like opening a restaurant in a food court. When you open a restaurant in a food court, oftentimes you're in a shared location where you're sharing tables and chairs with other restaurants within that space. Shared hosting works much the same way. You are a site on a server that is shared with many other websites. So you're sharing resources with other websites on this one computer located in the real world. Usually, shared hosting plans tend to be the least expensive in my experience. They are generally pretty fast and easy to set up, and they are one of the most common types of hosting for beginners. Many website builders and platforms used shared hosting and bundle that with domain registration, as well as like an email inbox or having a native site builder and things like that. So it's often bundled with a bunch of other things when you're starting to look for website building plans. The downside of this type of hosting is that your shared environment, because you're sharing this platform with other websites, can affect your website's performance. If there are demands from other websites on the same server, for instance, if there are like really busy traffic times where lots of people are visiting your website, but also visiting other people's site, you may see lag in your website. You may see poor performance or loading times or responsiveness in your website. You don't have a lot of server control with this option. So if you're building a site with security being the #1 feature you want to focus on, you can't really customize the security features on this type of hosting plan. This option is not super great for website setups that are very specific in terms of functionality or sites that require super high security. What comes to mind when I think of shared hosting is things like blogs or small portfolios. Some small stores might be a good fit for this type of hosting. The next type of hosting that I generally see a lot of is what's called cloud hosting, and it's what I use in my business the most. Cloud hosting is a little bit more difficult to understand, but if we're going back to that restaurant metaphor, having a cloud hosting platform is a lot like owning a restaurant chain where if you have a chain restaurant, like a fast food restaurant, right, it's going to be the same menu and the same type of tables and chairs and setup, just in many, many different locations. So a cloud host will have your website hosted on a server in the real world, but it also will have it on multiple servers across the country. And it's shared between that server. So you're sharing your website resources between many different computers located in many different places. The benefit of something like this is if one server goes down for whatever reason, whether it gets hacked or if like there are hardware issues with that particular server, with cloud hosting, your site will still remain active and you're not going to see much change in performance quality because your site is also located on many other servers. Traffic on these types of plans is shared between servers. So generally speaking, when you use a cloud hosting platform, you will get increased higher speeds and performances on your site. And they're also fairly easy to use. They're not as simple as a shared hosting plan might be, but they're with a slight learning curve, fairly easy to set up. Business websites that would benefit from a plan like this would be sites that expect a lot of web traffic. So if you're getting a lot of visitors to your site, you might want to look at a cloud hosting platform, or businesses that have expanded upon their shared hosting needs. So you started with shared hosting, but it's not quite enough for you, and you don't want to spend a lot of money. Cloud hosting is like the next best option for your business. The third type of hosting I want to go over today is probably the most expensive and may not be the best fit for your business as you first start out, but it's good to keep in mind, especially if you have a site that you anticipate to get really, really big. And it is called a virtual private server host. And virtual private server hosting is somewhat similar to opening a restaurant in like a strip mall, for example. A restaurant in a strip mall is going to have one building that is shared between several different companies, but each space within that building is your own. So your restaurant in a strip mall will have your own kitchen, you'll have your own tables, you'll have your own setup and things like that. Similarly, a virtual private server is a server that has a couple of websites on it, but it has set aside resources just for your site. So you're not competing with other websites for resources on this particular server. This site is really, or this hosting option is really great for very high traffic websites or sites that have a ton of resources on them. They are often very, very fast and have very good performance. You do have to kind of control some of your security options on this. So it does require you to learn a little bit more about her hosting to have this option. Because you're going to be in control of the web traffic on your site in a much more hands-on sort of way. Virtual private hosting is a great option for businesses with huge e-commerce stores or businesses that are storing a lot of information that's accessed fairly frequently, like archives and things like that. When you're looking for hosting, oftentimes these types of plans will be provided by the same host. So you can start with one and move to a different hosting plan if need be. As you're looking for hosting providers, you want to look for ones that provide multiple hosting types of plans, right? So like when you start your website, it can always expand to be something different later on. You want to looking for hosting providers that have a long track history and offers several subscription models. You want to make sure that the hosting platform you're on, and this is industry standard, but it's always good to double check, always provides firewalls, what's called an SSL certificate, and then enforces HTTPS in the browser. These are security measures that encrypt information about your site on the server, so it's less vulnerable to attack. It is always good when you're looking for a hosting plan to make sure that that hosting provider does multiple websites, backups of your website. The hosting provider I use does this up to 3 to 4 times a day. As you're building your site, I can almost guarantee that you're going to mess something up because you're still learning about it and you're still figuring out what to do on your site. And oftentimes, if you make a mistake on your website, it can take hours upon hours to figure out what you did and how to fix it. And oftentimes, rather than trying to fix that issue, if your hosting provider does backups of your site, you can go back up to a different version of your site, maybe one from the day before or something like that, where that website mistake that you have made is no longer part of the code for that site. As part of that too, because you're going to make mistakes and things are going to get confusing, you want to make sure you're looking for a hosting provider that has a good web support system in place. You want something where you can talk to a person and troubleshoot issues on your site without having to know like what that issue might be right away, because you're going to make mistakes as you start out. Once you have found a hosting plan, or as you're finding a hosting plan, the next thing you need to think about is going to be your domain name. And if we go back to the restaurant metaphor, again, your domain name is your building sign. It's what tells visitors where your site is located and how to find your site. Oftentimes, I see URLs and domains used interchangeably. And that is not entirely accurate, but in order to understand domains, it is important to understand what the URL is as well. So a URL is going to be made of 4 parts, which include your domain name. The first part of URL is going to be what's called a protocol. And all this is it tells the web browser whether or not your site is secure. So it'll start with something like HTTPS, and you want to make sure you're looking for that HTTPS in your website domain so you know that your site is secure. The next part of a URL is what's called a subdomain. Oftentimes it'll be something like www.businessname.com. So it'll be that www dot at the beginning of that. But occasionally it'll be something like shop.com dot or blog dot businessname.com. And what this subdomain does, and you can somewhat customize this on certain website platforms, is it tells search engines what your web page is. So it's really great for search engine optimization if you can customize that subdomain. The next part of URL is going to be your main domain. This is the main website identity that you're working with. It is the business name that you're putting in the URL. The last part of a URL is what's going to be called a top-level domain. I've also been seeing it called a domain extension. And it tells us what kind of site we're browsing. And with domain name extensions, there are a variety of options you can go with. In the early days of the internet, only a few extensions were available, and most sites still contain some default extensions. They are going to be .com, .org, .edu, and .gov. These are the four most common ones I see. There's a few other default ones. But generally speaking, .com is going to be what you see on most domain names. It used to be just reserved for commercial businesses, but it has kind of defaulted to being a default for any sort of type of website you want to put up. Alternatively, there's also .org, and .org is mostly used for nonprofit organizations. So you have a nonprofit organization and you're starting to start a site for it. You'll use something like .org at the end of it. .com and .org are not restricted in terms of what you can do to register that domain with. You can just choose to register that on any domain name provider. However, things like .edu or .gov are going to be restricted in use. So if you want to use those, there are agencies you have to register that domain name with to get approved to use those extensions. .edu is for educational websites, particularly accredited degree granting institutions. And the registration and administration of .edu domains are managed by an organization called EDUCAUSE. So if you want to use something like that, you have to register that domain with that organization. Similarly, .gov is going to be restricted in use, and it is really only reserved for government agencies and employees. So in order to use a .gov domain, you must be a government employee, or you must be working on behalf of a government organization, and you have to register that domain through what's called git.gov. Most generic top-level domains are available to you, but you can also kind of get creative with this. Now domains have expanded to include many, like hundreds of other extensions, things like .shop if you have an online store, or .club if you're running some sort of community club, or .blog, .ai. There's a whole bunch of them, and you can register your domain under one of those. And by doing so, you can really specialize your domain name to what your business does. With that being said, there are a few things you want to keep in mind if you choose to go that route, or a few things to also keep in mind as you're registering your domain. Again, going back to that big question we asked earlier, right? Who is our audience? Some audiences, if you know who your audience are, only trust generic extensions and names. So if you know that your audience is very particular about what they access on the web, you may want to end your site in something really generic, like .com, so they know what they're looking for. You want to make sure that your domain name is relatively easy to remember. You don't want to overcomplicate this. You want to keep it fairly simple. If it has a ton of words in it, if you have like 15 different words in your domain name, it's likely that users aren't going to be able to remember it off the top of their head. You also want to make sure that your domain name reflects what your business does. So either via the name you actually register or the top level domain extension. What I see happen sometimes in this like example is domain names will have a .org extension to them, but they are not nonprofit organizations because it's not restricted in use of registration. So it could be really misleading to visitors if you have something like a .org domain extension when you're just a commercial company. So you want to make sure your domain name really reflects what your business is doing and your business values. With that, you have found your physical building for your restaurant, you found your restaurant building sign. Now you need to think about like what goes inside the restaurant. And this is where we start thinking about content management systems for your business. I put a disclaimer at the bottom of this because we're going to be looking at a few different web builder providers. And these are companies that I have used their platform before. But it doesn't necessarily mean that like one is better than the other. It just reflects my own personal experience in working with these platforms. I also want to like put out the disclaimer that there are many out there. So the ones that I go over today might not be the best fit for your business and you may want to explore other options. But the goal with this section is to get you started at looking at some of these platforms to see if they're a good fit for your business or not. The first type of content management system you'll likely run into is what I call a website builder. And a website builder is often going to include domain registration, hosting, and a web builder that has a simple user interface as part of it, with pre-made widgets and templates to get started. These types of builders are, generally speaking, the simplest way to get started, and they often will have many tools that beginners need to get started with their website. They are quick to set up. They have a lot of built-in tutorials and guides. They are closed source, which means that their software and functionality cannot be changed by the public. They are managed within that company's own system. And because of that, the sites are a little easier to keep secure if you don't know what you're doing in terms of site security and hosting. There are lots of these types of builders available, and they offer various subscription plans and pricing ranging from, I think, Wix offers a free plan to about like $30 to $40 a month. The downside of using something like this is, even though it's really simple to start, a web builder like these often means that you're stuck with this web builder for the duration of your website. These types of builders make it really difficult to transfer your website from one platform to another. So you'll really have to rely on the available building templates of these platforms, as well as like any hosting fees that come with these platforms. So if those change or get higher in price, you're kind of stuck with it. You are somewhat limited to the functionality and design options built into that particular platform. You're often going to be using pre-made templates and widgets and things like that. These types of builders are really great for sites that aren't going to change a whole lot. They are going to get up and running and they're there to provide information, and they're generally going to kind of stay the same for the duration of that website. These sites are great for getting started without any outside help. So if you don't have it in your budget to hire a designer like myself, you can oftentimes rely on these platforms to guide you through the website building process. These sites also, because they have a lot of pre-made templates and things like that, they make getting your site up and running fairly quick. The other type of content management system is what I call a sole content management system. And the biggest one on the web out there right now is WordPress. A little over 40% of web users still use WordPress as their website platform. So it's really big and it's really robust. And these type of content management systems will often require you to find your own hosting, register your own domain, and use that system on those pre-registered things that you're managing on your own. They, generally speaking, are a bit more complex to set up, but the upside of that is because of the amount of control you have almost unlimited flexibility with how you manage your site. And you can make really diverse changes to your site that can be applied later on down the line for your business. And they are really, really easy to transfer between hosting platforms. So if you build a WordPress website on one hosting platform and that hosting platform ups its fees, for example, it's easy to take that website code and files and save it and then put it on a different hosting platform that better fits your business. WordPress, generally speaking, is open source, which means that the public can create applications, code, and software that can run on it. And the really great thing about that is WordPress has something like 60,000 plugins, which are just applications you install on your website to use, whereas something like Wix only has about 300. So you can do a lot of things with these platforms and include a lot of functionality without having to know how to code those things yourself. They give you a lot of design freedom with how you want your website to look because you're controlling it yourself. And you can also control how your site runs on the back end a lot easier. This makes it easier to optimize your site to show up higher on like Google search results and things like that. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about web builders, and then we'll talk a little bit about WordPress. The two most common web builders I have run into that I have helped businesses use are Wix and Shopify. Wix is a great platform for things like informational sites. It has a lot of design templates and a lot of widgets and things you can use to build your site. And it generally is fairly cost effective to start with. I think it offers some free plans with the caveat that in its domain name, you have to have Wix listed somewhere. Wix recently has started incorporating a lot of AI functionality into their website builder. So businesses can start building websites on Wix using a few prompts from their AI and then customize them from there. Alternatively, you can use a website builder like Shopify, and Shopify is really great for e-commerce. It is made for that. It has a lot of third-party integration for marketing and accounting, so Shopify can connect to something like QuickBooks really easily. And Shopify is great because if you have a store that is both online and in person, Shopify has point of sale hardware you can purchase from them that you can use in person in store. So you can manage all of your transactions through Shopify rather than having them managed in multiple different places. Because Shopify is such an e-commerce friendly platform, it has a lot of customer support built into it. So as you're looking at these builders, if you want an informational site, generally speaking, Wix is the way to go. If you're looking to start a store, Shopify might be a better fit for you. Alternatively, you can use WordPress. WordPress can do both informational sites and e-commerce sites. And if you want a lot of customization to your website and freedom to control how your site looks, as well as freedom to include a lot of different kinds of functionality into your site, it's probably good to start looking at building a WordPress website. It has, again, like 60,000 plugins to customize features on your site. And unlike Wix or Shopify, you can build in WordPress almost however you wish. In addition to its like native page builder that it has, you can purchase software and plugins that allow you to build on a WordPress site using drag and drop functionality similar to something like Wix or Shopify. That combined with any sort of functionality, it can pair and cooperate with a lot of existing platforms. That has a lot of like integrations with other pieces of software. Examples of that is WordPress is really great to work with something like MailChimp. If you have a MailChimp account, if you're using something like Google Analytics, it pairs really well with social media platforms. And it has the best options for customization as well as scalability. So WordPress sites can start really simple, but then expand to be really complex. So they're going to scale really well with your business. The downside of WordPress is that it does have a learning curve associated with it. So there's a little bit of learning you're going to have to do to get these sites started. Should you be interested in using WordPress, and as you're starting to look at WordPress sites, you'll notice that there are two different routes you can take, and it's a little confusing as to like which one you should go for. WordPress has WordPress.com, but it also has WordPress.org. If you don't feel comfortable finding your own hosting provider and finding a domain name registration service, WordPress.com has that built into its platform. So it works kind of like Wix or Shopify in that regard. It still uses the WordPress platform, but it manages your hosting and domain registration for you. However, if you do feel comfortable finding your own hosting platform and finding your own domain name, WordPress.org might be a better fit for you because it, generally speaking, is a little less expensive to go for because you are paying for hosting outside of the WordPress platform, so you can kind of shop around for different hosting plans. And WordPress.org allows you to manage a lot more security features on your site as well as management of web traffic. So it kind of depends on like how much control you want over your website and the back end of things. The benefits of doing something like WordPress.org is that you get a lot of control over your website. And oftentimes you can start your site for something as low as like $3 a month. Great. So you have found your host, you found your domain, and you have a content management system in mind. You got those set up, and now you need to start thinking about the pages that are going on your site. So we're going to talk a little bit about what I would recommend versus like what is always going to be required on your website. Informational sites and e-commerce sites are going to have very similar builds to start off with. On any content management system you use or any web builder you use, you're going to be required to build what's called a landing page, which is your home page. And this page is when you type in your domain name, it's going to be the page that pops up on screen. It's going to be the first page visitors see on your website. And it's often the most important page on your site. On your home or landing page, you should be listing all of the most information about your business. You should be doing so without using a lot of lengthy text. You don't want visitors to come to your website and the first thing they see is like stacks and stacks of paragraphs. You don't want visitors to have to read through all of that. You want to put a lot of decorative elements on your homepage while also conveying what your business does. If you're going to put a lot of effort into any page on your site, it should be on your homepage. In addition to requiring a landing page, and this is something I see missing on sites fairly frequently, you should be providing a privacy policy and a terms of use page. I'm not an attorney, so I can't advise as to like what should be in those because they're going to change for your business. But generally speaking, your privacy policy and terms of use pages or documents are required pages that tell users how your website is using their data as they are browsing your website. And then it's also telling visitors what they can expect on your site and how they can interact with your site. So if you have something like an e-commerce store, you're going to put things like your return policies and shipping policies in these documents. Often you can find these privacy policies and terms of use documents as templates online. Or you can use something like Nzuzo, which is a service that automatically generates those for your website. In addition to your home privacy policy and terms of use page, if you decide to build an e-commerce store, you also need to think about how you're going to build your shop pages. These are things like your store page, your cart, and your checkout. If you go the e-commerce route, a lot of the times these platforms will have templates you can use to start off with these. You don't have to start your shop pages from scratch oftentimes. In addition to those required pages, a few pages I always have clients start off with are going to be your About Us, your Services, and your Contact page. Your About page is going to be where you can tell customers who you are as a business. And this is where you can list things like your business story, your employees, if you want to feature your employees. If you have mission statements, those should go there, as well as like maybe some FAQs can go on your About page. Your services page is going to be where you tell customers what your business offers and how you are different from your competitors. What makes your business special should go on your services page. Lastly, I always recommend building a contact page on your website. It is where you can put things like a contact form where visitors can essentially send you an email from your website. They're going to fill out a form, and when they hit submit, it should send an email to your inbox with their message in it. On the contact page, you can also list things like your business hours, your business address, any additional phone numbers or emails, and things like that. With that being said, I have put together a series of resources that you may want to start looking at as you build your site with all of this information in mind. I think we have about 15 minutes left, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then open up the room to any questions folks may have. Right. Gabriella or Sophia, do you have anything you want to like touch base on in regards to the New Mexico Minority Business Development Agency and what we're doing with websites right now?
Yes, of course. We see. Oh, thank you so much for covering all that knowledge. It's really helpful, especially the resource. The last slide. I think it's really important to take in all the difference, right, between what will be more convenience is an e-commerce or just a normal website. What will be the domain? So that's really important. But yes, so we are doing this because we see a lot of businesses are just starting and the need to promote and have a place, right? Even if they want to, like you say, I have an e-commerce, they want to have a place to sell their products, and also, or just to have a place where people can go and see information about them. What is that company about? What they sell? How, a little bit of history. I have a quick question because some of the businesses that we work with, it range. There could be really small startups, they're just thinking about it, and then others that already have years in the market. But even though they have, some years in the market, sometimes I see websites that don't have like about us or a
Right.
why. right? And I think it's really important to get to the public and, like you said at the beginning, know your audience, but speak to them and
Right.
tell them, hey, why am I doing this? You know, why is this business, what is this business about? What is my history? Who I am,
Mhm.
and who, you know, all that essence, I would call it, I don't know how to call it, but that essence of the business to have it
Right.
there. So if you can tell us a little bit more about that part of it, and if you think it's important, and
Um,
why yes or why not, and we have.
and I saw somebody raise their hand, so I'll come
Yes,
back in
I
a
saw that.
second.
Yeah.
It kind of depends on what your business does. I think for New Mexico businesses, especially, it is important to tell your story because I think New Mexican audiences oftentimes like want to connect with your business and support local businesses. On your about page, a lot of the times what I have people do is I will have them provide two things. The first thing I'll have them provide is what their business story is. Tell us about your business. How did you get started? Why did you start this business? What inspires you about this business? What's important to you as somebody who provides services or goods? The next thing I often recommend including is something like a biography of any important stakeholders in the business. So if you are a one-person business, this will be your bio. Tell us a little bit about you. Why should we trust you? Like why are you so interested in this business? Who are you? And like, how can we connect with you? Those are things I would often include on the about page. And I think it is one of the most essential pages you can have on your website because it makes you seem like a person rather than a corporate entity. So I know somebody raised their hands, but I totally
It was
forgot you.
Kamal Davis.
Okay, go ahead. Feel free to answer your question. And you can put it in the chat too, if that's easier.
Kamal, I think I gave to you access to speak, so you can go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, awesome, awesome, awesome. So that is one of the things that I am doing. I'm really glad that I stepped in at the right moment. God works in mysterious ways. But one of the things that I was doing is I am writing I'm getting a full branding package done for my
Okay.
business, Cyber Brilliance. And one of the things that he told me to start thinking about is an about me page or about us page. And this is exactly what I need to touch on. So I didn't have any type of direction as to where I needed to go. I didn't know what to put. I didn't know what was appropriate. I didn't know how to really, intrigue my customers. So this is very valuable. And if you have any type of maybe like I don't know, any kind of direction for them as some of the things you just said to send to me, that would be awesome because that would really help me. Or you can help me. I don't care if I have to pay you or not. But I really need that because it's almost done. The website is almost done.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure that I appeal to my customers and let them know why I started this, what this business can do for them, and how I can be of service to them, and all the services that I provide,
Yeah.
to kind of protect their
Yeah.
infrastructure.
I'll go ahead and put my email in the chat. That way people have it. So if you
Okay.
want to contact me, you can.
Okay.
What I would recommend you doing first off is look at what your competitors are doing. What you said you run a cybersecurity business?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So find a couple other cybersecurity companies like in New Mexico and
Uh-huh.
if they have an about page and what they're listing. I would recommend putting things in addition to like maybe your bio and your business story. What your business values are. Do you have a mission statement? What's important to you? Like listing
I
those
do.
things, as well as possibly giving credit to the employees who work with you. So like if you have employees who work one-on-one with customers, oftentimes it's helpful to have a face to the name, and you can
Okay.
put employees on that about page as well.
Okay. Okay. That's awesome. I don't have any employees yet. I am
Okay.
star performer of this show. So I am the only one, but I do have a lot of education, a lot of certifications in the field to kind of give that value added proposition to my customers. So that's kind of the things that I'm kind of going to focus on. But yes, I would love your contact information. I would love to have a one-on-one and kind of delve deeper into this thing. You know, because this is very important. One of the writers, I spoke to a writer, and one of the things that she said was very important is that I really create an emotional parallel with my customers, really
Yeah.
be able to bring that to the forefront so that they can not only understand what it is that I'm doing, the services I'm offering, but have some type of emotional connection to what I'm doing. And I was like, well, will that be relevant in cybersecurity? She said it's relevant in any business. I was like, oh,
Right,
okay.
yeah.
So, yeah, definitely, I would love to pick your brain about that, you know, at another time. But this is perfect that we were able to touch on that. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Kamal, for that. And I have a last question. We are here ending in our almost ending. So what I noticed, because sometimes I have to, our example is like we have to find vendors, for example, in whatever topic, let's say videographers, I don't know, video
Okay.
creation or things like that. So I will start Googling to have a more, so already we have a contact list, but we would like to include every single time more and more vendors. And sometimes when I look at the websites, I don't see emails. And I
Yeah.
know, you know, some of them have, some of them not, and some of them have a little, if you go to the contact us,
Mhm.
you go straight to put your name, last name, message,
Right.
and all of that. What do you think about that? I personally don't like it. If
Yeah.
I'm a customer, I'm seeing, okay, goes to whatever, you know, whatever they will go to an email or something until they reply to me or something. I'm as a customer, I love to have all the information there, like
Mhm.
address, if they have an address, telephone number, and email. And
Yeah.
if it's possible, a name, but well, it's not that, you know, but at
Yeah.
least having an email or in a phone number. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
what do you think about that?
I would recommend doing both. Because I am somewhat similar. I hate filling out contact forms on sites. But there are folks who really like that. The big things I would suggest doing is listing any email addresses on your contact page in addition to the form. And a lot of the time, what you can do with website building services is sometimes you'll see those email addresses that are like info@businessname.com. When you go to register your domain and connect that with your web builder, your hosting provider should be able to set you up with a email inbox that has that domain name extension on it. So I always like if businesses are able to set that up. But yeah, absolutely. List your email addresses on like the footer of your website where you keep your business hours and your phone numbers and things like that, but also have a contact form. I would suggest you do both. But yeah, that email address is really important to have on there, especially if you have multiple employees as part of your business who answer questions or interact with customers. It's always really beneficial on like your about page, for example, where you have your employees listed, provide that employee like email address too, in addition to like your main one in the footer. So like that way customers and website visitors have many ways to get in touch with you rather than just the form.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Jordan, for that. Well, I don't see any more questions, so thank you so much for all the content. And today's webinar was a really helpful webinar. So, and for the ones that are interested, please reach out to us to keep. Well, Jordan already put her email. You can contact her or contact us. So because she has she can help you with ins and outs about websites. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely interested in getting her contact information. So please, Sophia, send that to me if you can. Thank you.
yes, of course. Okay, thank you,
Yeah.
and everyone have a great rest of your day.
Okay. Bye.
See ya. Thank you so much. And happy 4th of July, guys.
Thank
Yeah, happy 4th.
All right.
you. Okay.